The count was wrong, and Fleetmaster Voral knew it before the second scan finished. He stood on the high bridge of the carrier spine Corin Hall, 300 screens burning in front of him, and every one of them showed the same impossible number. 40,012 ships of the Sevoon Concord filled the dark above the blue world the soft skins called Earth. That number was correct. That number had been correct for 9 days, ever since the Concord folded into this system to settle a debt of pride. The number that was wrong sat in the lower corner of the tactical plate, blinking a soft amber, and it would not stop blinking. Enemy contacts in defense of the target world. 1. Voral pressed 2 of his 4 hands flat on the rail. "Scan it again," he said. His voice was even. A Fleetmaster's voice was always even. "All bands. I want a tonnage estimate, a power signature, and an origin tag inside the minute." His sensor chief, a pale young officer named Tessic, leaned into the readout. The light of it washed his face gray. "Already running, Fleetmaster. The contact does not move. It sits in a high orbit over the northern pole of the target world. It has not fired. It has not hailed. It does not answer our pings." "One ship," Voral said. "One ship," Tessic agreed. A junior officer at the plotting table laughed once, short and nervous, before he could stop himself. "One ship," the young officer repeated, as if saying it a third time would make it funnier. "Fleetmaster, one ship has come to defend a whole world from 40,000. They must have run out of ships. Or run out of sense." A few of the crew near him smiled, grateful for the release, eager to believe the joke. Voral did not smile, and the smiles around the table faded under the weight of his silence. He had served the count too long to laugh at a number that would not stop blinking. Behind them, the bridge was full of the low hum of 40,000 crews, waiting for an order that had been promised to them as a formality. The Concord had not come here for a war. The Concord had come here for a lesson. Earth had refused to surrender a trade lane, refused to bend a knee in a council chamber, 11 light-years away, and the Concord did not let a knee stay unbent. So they had sent the Iron Tally, the largest punitive fleet assembled in 400 years, to fold over a backward little world and turn its silence into ash. The plan filled a single page. Arrive. Demand. Erase if the demand was not met. The plan did not have a paragraph for one ship. "Magnify the contact," Voral said. The center screen blanked, then resolved. The image came in slowly, the way deep orbit imaging always did, building from a smudge into an outline into a shape, and the shape kept building. Voral waited for it to stop. It did not stop. The hull filled the frame, then it overran the frame, and the imaging system pulled back its zoom to fit the whole of the thing, and pulled back again, and again. It was long and low and dark, a slab of layered armor the color of wet iron, ridged with paneling so dense the eye could not find a flat surface anywhere on it. There was a tower near the stern, a stacked structure bristling with arrays, and along the flanks ran rows of housings that Voral's training told him were weapons, and his instinct told him were something worse. The thing did not glow. It did not pose. It hung there, over the pole of a small blue planet, weathered, scarred, patient, and it looked at the Iron Tally the way a wall looks at the wind. "Tonnage," Voral said. Tessic did not answer at once. When he did, his voice had thinned. "The estimate is climbing, Fleetmaster. The system keeps revising it upward. The current figure is..." He stopped. "It can't be right." "Say it." 14.2 million tons. Single hull. No drive bloom large enough to have brought a mass like that into the system. And yet it is here. He swallowed. "Fleetmaster, a ship that size is not in our archives. Not the Concords, not the Threlics, not the old Vanu ledgers. There is no entry for it, no class, no builder, no prior sighting. It is not in any record we hold." Voral felt the first cold thread move through him, and he hated it. He had buried that feeling 100 times in his service. He buried it now. A Fleetmaster did not flinch at a large hull. Large hulls had been broken before. The Concord had cracked dreadnoughts twice this thing's mass by simple weight of fire, by throwing 1,000 lances at one point, until the point gave way. Numbers were the Concord's faith and its weapon both. 40,000 was not a count. 40,000 was a verdict. "It is one ship," Voral said again, louder now. so the whole bridge could carry the certainty he was choosing. It cannot be in our records, because the soft-skins built it in secret, recently, hoping it would frighten us. It has not fired because it cannot fire on 40,000 and win, and its crew knows that. It is a bluff. A very large, very heavy bluff. He turned from the screen. Signals. Open a channel to the contact. Wideband. Let them hear the whole fleet behind my voice. The signal officer's claws moved across her board. Channel open, Fleet Master. Vorel spoke to the dark. Unidentified vessel, in orbit of the Third World. You stand in the path of the iron tally of the Savun Concord. You are outnumbered 40,000 to 1. The world you guard has refused the Concord's lawful demand, and that refusal has a price. Stand down your guard, withdraw beyond the system edge, and you will be permitted to leave. Remain, and you will be counted among the erased. You have 6 minutes to answer. He cut the channel. He waited. Across the bridge, 10,000 small sounds went quiet. Officers who had served Vorel for years watched the central screen and the dark slab on it and the small blue world beneath it, and not one of them breathed loudly. The young officer who had laughed was not laughing now. He stared at the tonnage figure on his plate, as if it might change if he looked at it hard enough. It did not change. 14.2 million tons did not change for anyone. For 5 of the 6 minutes, the contact did nothing. It did not move. It did not power up. It did not answer. The bridge clock counted down in soft amber numbers, and with every number that fell, Vorel felt the certainty he had chosen settle a little deeper, like a stone finding the bottom of a still pool. He began to believe his own speech. The cold thread in him loosened a little. A bluff that did not speak when challenged was a bluff that knew it was beaten. He raised one hand to give the order that would begin the lesson, that would send the first wave of lances down toward the pole and crack the dark hull and the world behind it. At 5 minutes and 40 seconds, the contact answered. It did not answer with words. A single, narrow pulse of light reached out from the dark slab. Not a weapon, not yet. Only a beam of structured energy, thin as a needle, and it touched the Corinhall's outer sensor mast and held there for exactly 1 second. In that second, every screen on Vorel's bridge filled with data that was not his. Schematics, tonnage tables, range envelopes, a list, scrolling too fast to read, of every Concorde ship in the system, each tagged with a number, each number a firing solution. Then the beam withdrew. The screens cleared, and in the silence that followed, a single line of plain text sat in the center of Vorel's tactical plate, rendered in the Concorde's own script, perfectly formed, as if the thing had learned their language in the second it touched their mast. The line read, "You have 6 minutes. We only needed 1. Tessic made a sound that was almost a word. Vorel did not turn to him. He stared at the line, and the cold thread in him pulled tight again, and this time it did not loosen. "Fleet Master," the signal officer whispered. "The contact is transmitting on the same wide band you used. The whole fleet heard it. All 40,000 crews. They all just read that line." Vorel understood, in that instant, what had been done to him. The thing had not bluffed. It had not begged. It had not even threatened. It had reached out, taken his fleet's measure down to the last bolt, handed him the proof that it had done so, and then turned his own broadcast trick back on him, so that every crew under his command would watch their master be answered. He had wanted the fleet to hear his certainty. Now the fleet had heard something else, and a fleet master, who has been answered in front of 40,000 crews, has only one road left, and that road runs straight ahead. "Lock the contact," Vorel said, and his even voice cracked on the second word, and he forced it flat again. "First wave, 2,000 lances. Concentrate on the dorsal armor at the tower. I want that hull open before it finishes whatever it thinks it is doing." 2,000 lances. Aye, the weapons chief called. The order went out. Across the near face of the iron tally, 2,000 ships rolled to bring their forward arrays to bear, and 2,000 firing chambers spun up, and the dark above Earth began, for the first time, to glow. The young officer at the plotting table watched the lances charge with his jaw set tight, and Vorel saw the boy's hands shaking on his console, and chose to look away, because a fleet master cannot afford to see fear and still give the order, and the order had to be given. On the central screen, The dark slab did not move. It did not raise a shield. It did not turn to run. It simply opened its eyes, a long row of pale apertures running the length of its flank, brightening one after another like windows in a house at dusk. And the apertures turned, all of them, toward the Corin Hall, at the center of the fleet, toward the bridge, toward Vorel. Tessik's voice was very small. "Fleetmaster, it is not looking at the 2000. "No," Vorel said. "It is looking at us." Vorel watched the apertures hold their aim on the bridge, and he understood the message inside the message. The Deep Watch was not going to begin with the 2000 ships now charging their chambers. It was telling him, plainly, in the only language a Fleetmaster could not misread, that the order of dying would not follow the order of firing. It would follow the order of choosing. The ones who pressed the attack hardest would not be spared for their courage, and the ones who held back would not be the first to die. The choice of how to answer this hull would become, in time, the choice of who survived it. He did not understand yet how completely that was true. He would. "Fleetmaster," Drent said quietly, leaning close so the bridge would not hear. "I have watched a great many enemies in 60 years. They all wanted something. Territory, tribute, vengeance, fear. I cannot read what this one wants, and that frightens me more than its size. A hull that big should be roaring at us. This one is only watching. It has the manner of a thing that has already decided how this ends, and is simply waiting for us to arrive at the same conclusion. It wants the same thing every enemy of the Concord has ever wanted," Vorel said, and he heard the brittleness in his own even voice, and could not stop it. "It wants to be the exception. It wants to be the one ship that does not break. They all want that, Drent. None of them have ever been it." He set his jaw. "This one will not be either." The first wave fired. 2,000 lances of white fire crossed the dark toward the dark slab, and Fleetmaster Vorel, who had never in 400 engagements doubted a count, watched them go, and felt, for the first time in his life, that he had brought far too few. The 2,000 lances never reached the hull. Vorel watched them cross the gap, 2,000 spears of white fire converging on one point near the dark slab's tower, and he waited for the flare of impact, for the bloom of cracked armor, for the small proof that weight of fire still ruled the dark. The flare did not come. Half a second before the lances struck, the air in front of the slab simply changed. There was no shield bubble, no shimmer of a field, nothing his sensors could name. There was only a region of space, a thin sheet of it, that the lances entered and did not leave. They went in white and bright, and they came out as nothing at all, scattered into a faint warm haze that the slab seemed to drink. "Report," Vorel said. The weapons chief stared at her board. "Full salvo expended. 0 impact registered. The contact's hull shows no damage, no energy spike, no heat bloom." She looked up, and her face had gone the color of ash. "Fleetmaster, it did not block the salvo. It absorbed it. The hull is warmer by 1 degree. 1 degree. 2,000 lances, the killing weight that had broken 3 empires, and the thing that should not exist, had answered them with 1 degree of warmth." "Again," Vorel said. 5,000 this time. Spread the aim points. If it can drink 1 beam, it cannot drink 100 at 100 angles." The order went out, and 5,000 ships of the Iron Tally turned and fired, and the dark above Earth filled with a lattice of white fire so dense it threw shadows across the bridge. For a moment the central screen was nothing but light, and Vorel let himself believe, again, that weight would win, that it always won, that the page with the simple plan was right after all. The light cleared. The slab was still there. It had not moved a kilometer. The pale apertures along its flank were brighter now, every one of them lit, and the warm haze around it had grown, a soft golden corona that ate the white fire and gave back nothing. 1 degree, the weapons chief whispered. "Again, it is warmer by 1 degree." Vorel did the arithmetic without wanting to. 2,000 lances had warmed it 1 degree. 5,000 had warmed it 1 more. The relationship was not linear, which meant it was not a heat sink that would eventually fill, which meant there was no number of lances that filled it. He had built his whole career on the faith that there was always a number large enough. He looked at the golden corona and understood, in a cold, flat way, that for the first time, he had met a thing for which there was not. "Fleetmaster, a captain 3 stations down, a stolid officer named Penru, who commanded the carrier spine's escort wing, spoke without turning from her board. I have ordered the escort wing to hold fire. With respect, we have warmed it 2 degrees with 7,000 lances. The math does not reward more. I will not spend my crew's magazines to raise the temperature of a wall. You will fire when I order the wing to fire, Voral said. I will, Fleet Master. I am telling you that when you do, it will accomplish exactly as much as the 7,000 already have, and I want that on the log before it does. Penru finally turned. Her eyes were steady. I have served the Count 30 years. The Count is wrong today. I would rather say so now than after my wing is dust. Voral did not have an answer for her, and a Fleet Master without an answer is a dangerous thing, so he said nothing, and turned back to the screen. Tessic spoke from the sensor station, and his voice had the flat calm of someone who has stopped hoping. Fleet Master, I have the origin tag. It finished resolving. He turned. The contact carries no Concord registry, no Threlic mark, no Vanu seal. It carries its own, a single name, broadcast in the clear on a frequency we use for distress, so that we could not miss it. It calls itself the Deep Watch. And below the name, there is a line of text the soft skins added for us. It reads, Built in the dark, you never looked into. Voral closed 2 of his eyes. Built in the dark, you never looked into. The Concord had charted this arm of the galaxy for 900 years. They had mapped every star, catalogued every species, weighed every fleet, and they had filed Earth under harmless. A young, loud, quarrelsome world with no navy worth the name. A world that could be lessened with a fraction of a punitive force. They had looked at Earth 1,000 times and seen nothing to fear. They had never looked at the dark beside it. It wants us to know we missed it, Penru said quietly. It is not just a weapon. It is a message. It learned our distress band so the name would reach every ear in the fleet. It learned our script so the line would land. A thing that wanted only to kill us would have killed us. This thing wants us to understand first. Fleet Master. It was the carrier spine's own captain now, an old officer named Drent, who had served the Corin Hall for 60 years, and had never once raised his voice on this bridge. He raised it now, low and urgent. We have fired 7,000 lances. We have warmed it by 2 degrees. At this rate, the fleet will exhaust its forward magazines before that hull notices we are here. We need a new doctrine. We have 40,000 ships, Voral said. There is no enemy a doctrine of 40,000 cannot answer. 40,000 ships that cannot scratch it, Drent said. Fleet Master, I have read the same archives you have. I know what we are. We are the largest hammer in this part of the sky. But you do not break a wall by throwing the hammer at it harder. The Deep Watch fired. It was not loud. That was the thing Voral would remember, if he lived to remember anything. There was no roar, because there was no air between the ships to carry one. There was only a change in the central screen, a single line of light so bright and so brief that the imaging system flinched and dimmed itself, and when it recovered, 11 ships of the Iron Tally were gone. Not damaged, not crippled, gone. Where 11 cruisers had held station off the Corin Hall's flank, there was now a slowly expanding cloud of fine, glittering dust, and the dark behind it, and nothing else. It fired 1 beam, Tessic said. His voice had gone high. 1. It passed through 11 of our hulls in a straight line, and it did not slow. The energy in that single shot, Fleet Master, the energy in that single shot is more than the Corin Hall's reactor could produce in a year. Voral looked at the dust where 11 ships had been. He looked at the dark slab, which had already gone still again, its single firing aperture cooling from white to dull red. He understood that he was looking at the truth he had refused for 9 minutes. The Iron Tally had not come to a battle. The Iron Tally had come to a reckoning, and it had come carrying a count it had mistaken for power. The bridge had gone silent in a way Voral had never heard. It was not the silence of discipline. It was the silence of 40 officers, each privately revising everything they had ever believed. It chose those 11, Penru said slowly. Look at the line. It fired straight at the Corin Hall and stopped 11 ships short. It could have taken us. It took 11 ships in a line pointing at this bridge instead, and it stopped. It is showing us it can reach us whenever it likes, and choosing not to yet. Why? The young officer at the plotting table whispered. He had not spoken since the laugh. Why would it stop short? Why not just... Because killing the Corin Hall ends the lesson, Drent said, and it is not finished teaching it. The old captain's voice was very quiet. Whatever that thing is, it is not in a hurry, and a thing that is not in a hurry, with a weapon like that, is the most frightening thing I have ever seen in 60 years of war. Vorel made himself speak, because the silence was its own kind of surrender, and a fleet master could not surrender to silence. It wants us to spend ourselves, he said. It wants us afraid, and it wants us angry, and it wants us to throw everything we have at it, because everything we have is exactly what it intends to take from us. So we will not do that. We will not. He stopped. He looked at the dust. He looked at the small blue world below the dark slab, and he understood that there was no order he could give that the Deep Watch had not already counted. The cold, flat truth of it pressed down on him like a weight. He gave the order anyway, because it was the only one left, and because a fleet master who stops giving orders has already lost the only thing the rank was ever made of. All ships, all 40,000. Open fire, continuous. Do not wait for orders to reload. Empty the magazines, now. And the Iron Tally obeyed. What followed was the largest sustained barrage in the recorded history of the Sevoon Concord. 40,000 ships fired and fired and fired. A wall of white fire that lit the whole northern sky of Earth, that turned night into noon on the world below, that any soul standing on that planet would have looked up and seen as a second sun blooming and holding and refusing to fade. The barrage went on for 4 minutes. The forward magazines of the Iron Tally, stocked for a year-long campaign, ran down toward empty in those 4 minutes, because Vorel had told them to spend everything, and they spent it. And the Deep Watch drank it. The golden corona around the dark hull swelled until the slab seemed to float inside a small warm star of its own making. The apertures along its flank blazed. The hull grew warmer. 3 degrees, 4, 6, and not one panel cracked, not one plate buckled, not one system failed. The Deep Watch took 4 minutes of 40,000 ships firing as fast as their crews could feed the chambers, and at the end of it, it was 8 degrees warmer, and entirely, perfectly intact. Magazines at 40% and falling fleet-wide, the weapons chief reported. Her voice had gone toneless. We have spent more than half the ammunition the Concord allocated for a year of war, in 4 minutes, and the only thing we have to show for it is 6 degrees of warmth on a hull we cannot touch. 8 degrees now, Tessick said. It is warmer the longer we fire. We are not hurting it, Fleet Master. We are charging it. The word landed on the bridge like a physical thing, charging it. Penru turned and looked at Vorel, and did not say anything, because she did not have to. Every officer on the bridge had understood the same sentence at the same moment. The white fire they had been pouring into the dark slab for 4 minutes had not been an attack. It had been a meal. When the barrage faltered, when the first ships began to call dry magazines, then the first 100, then the first 1,000, the Deep Watch stirred. It did not charge, it did not roar. It rolled, slowly, the long dark slab turning on its axis, with a grace that was obscene in something 14 million tons heavy, and as it turned, it brought a different face of itself toward the fleet, a face Vorel had not seen, a face that was nothing but weapon housings, hundreds of them, rank on rank, the whole flank of the ship a single bristling battery. It was holding back, Drent said, and there was something in the old captain's voice that Vorel had never heard there before. It was not fear, it was a kind of terrible understanding. 11 ships with 1 gun, out of how many? It has been answering us with 1 gun while we emptied our entire fleet into it. Fleet Master, it has not been fighting us. It has been letting us tire ourselves out. Vorel did not answer. There was nothing to answer. The Deep Watch's full battery lit. Not white this time. A deep, patient blue. Hundreds of apertures kindling at once, the light of them washing across the dust and debris of the 11 dead cruisers, and across the dark hulls of 40,000 ships that had just spent everything they had, and changed nothing. Defensive maneuvers, Vorel said, and even as he said it, he knew the words were empty. All ships, disperse. Break formation. Get distance. Now. Now. The battery fired. It was not a barrage. A barrage would have implied haste, implied effort, implied that the thing firing cared whether each shot mattered. This was something colder. Hundreds of beams of patient blue reached out from the Deep Watch in a single coordinated sweep, and each beam found a ship, and each ship was a tagged number, one of the firing solutions the Deep Watch had handed Voral 9 minutes earlier as a courtesy and a warning. The beams did not miss. They did not need to. The Deep Watch had measured every ship in the system in 1 second, and now it spent that measurement. 640 ships of the Iron Tally died in the first sweep, not crippled, killed, cleanly. Each one struck once in the place that ended it, the way a master swordsman touches an opponent once and steps back. The dark above Earth filled with 640 new clouds of glittering dust, and the Deep Watch's battery cooled and recharged, and the apertures kindled again. 640, Tessic said. He was reading the number off his board like a man reading his own sentence. 1 sweep. If it holds that rate, Fleetmaster, if it holds that rate, it clears the entire fleet in 62 sweeps. It has fired one. It will not hold the rate, Voral said. It was not a tactical judgment. It was a prayer, and he knew it. The Deep Watch fired a second sweep, 640 more. Exactly 640, not 639, not 641. The precision of it was worse than the slaughter. It was firing to a number, and Voral did not yet know what the number was, but the dread of finding out was already climbing in him faster than the casualty count. The Iron Tally began, for the first time in its history, to break. Not in the orderly way of a fleet executing a withdrawal, but in the ugly, scattering way of ships, whose crews had stopped believing in the count that had brought them here. Captains who had served the Concorde their whole lives turned their bows from the small blue world and ran, and the Deep Watch let some of them go a little way before the patient blue beams reached out and tapped them, once, each, and turned them to dust at the edge of the dark. It is letting them run, Penru said. It lets them get halfway to the edge before it takes them. It wants the rest of us to watch how far running gets you. Fleetmaster, there is no escape solution out there. It mapped every drive in the fleet in that first second. The ones who run are simply choosing to be the next dust. Voral stood at the center of it and made himself watch. A fleet master did not look away from his fleet, even as it ended, especially as it ended. Drent, he said quietly, when did we lose this? The old captain did not pretend to misunderstand. We lost it 900 years ago, Fleet Master, he said, when we charted this arm, and we filed that world under Harmless, and we never once looked into the dark beside it. We lost it long before we folded into this system. We just did not know it until today. He paused. The soft skins did not build that ship last week to frighten us. Look at the hull. Look at the weathering on it. That ship is old. It has been out here, in the dark, for a very long time, watching. And we never saw it, because we never thought there was anything worth seeing. On the central screen, the Deep Watch fired a third sweep, and a fourth, methodical, unhurried, 640 ships at a time. Each shot a number it had already counted. The golden corona of absorbed fire still glowed around its dark hull. It had taken everything the largest punitive fleet in 400 years could give it, and it had warmed by 8 degrees, and now it was spending the change at its leisure. A captain on the far flank, a proud officer named Vesson who had never in his life been told a target was beyond him, broke from formation with 200 ships and drove straight at the Deep Watch, all weapons firing, in the oldest doctrine the Concorde had, that a wall, struck hard enough at one point by enough hulls at once, must give. Voral watched the 200 go. He did not order them back. There was a part of him, the old part, the part that had served the Count its whole life, that needed to see what would happen, that still half believed the wall might give. The Deep Watch did not even turn to face them. A single section of its battery, perhaps a fifth of one flank, swiveled a few degrees and fired once, and the 200 ships of Captain Vesson became dust between one heartbeat and the next. The entire charge erased so completely that the wave of debris had not finished expanding before the Deep Watch's aperture had cooled. It had answered the boldest assault in the engagement with a fraction of itself, and then gone back to its sweeps, 640 at a time, as if the charge had never happened. That is the doctrine gone, Drent said softly. Concentration of force. The oldest one we have, 200 ships at one point, and it spent a fifth of one flank on them. There is no concentration we can bring that it cannot answer with less than it has. Fleetmaster, every column in the book is closed. I have served 60 years, and I have never seen the book closed before. I did not know it could be. Signals, Voral said. Open the wide band, the one I used, the one it answered on. The signal officer's claws hovered. Fleetmaster, open it. She opened it. Voral stood very straight on the high bridge of the dying Corin Hall, with the light of a fourth sweep washing across his face, and he spoke to the dark slab over the small blue world. This is Fleetmaster Voral, of the Sevun Concord, he said. I gave you 6 minutes to answer a demand. You answered in 1. I see that now. I am asking you a question, and I am asking it as the last thing I will do as a Fleetmaster, and I would like a true answer if you have one to give. He waited. The Deep Watch did not stop firing, but a line of text appeared on his tactical plate, in the Concord's own script, and it read, Ask. Voral asked, How long have you been watching us? The answer came slowly, one line, then another, building the way the image of the hull had built when he first magnified it, too large to take in all at once. We watched your fleet chart this arm 900 years ago. We watched you weigh our world and write the word harmless. We watched you teach that word to your children, and your children to theirs, until it became the truth your whole Concord stood on. We did not correct you. A wrong belief in an enemy is the best armor a quiet world can wear. So we let you believe it. We built in the dark you never looked into, and we waited, and we grew, and we said nothing. You sent 40,000 ships to erase a world you called harmless. We sent one to teach you the word you should have used. The text held on the screen. Below it, after a pause, came one final line, and it was the line Voral would carry with him through everything that followed. The word was hidden. The Deep Watch fired a fifth sweep. 640 more ships of the iron tally became dust above the pole of Earth, and the dark slab cooled and recharged, and the pale apertures along its flank kindled again, patient, unhurried, exactly as far from finished as it had been at the first. Voral read the words on his plate one more time. The word was hidden, and felt, for the first time, that he was not looking at a weapon at all. He was looking at a sentence the galaxy had been refusing to read for 900 years, and his fleet had just been chosen to read it aloud. The order to retreat came from outside Voral's fleet, and that was the worst part of all. It arrived on the long-range relay, folded in from the Concord core 11 light-years away, 11 minutes old by the time it reached the Corin Hall, which meant it had been sent before the first sweep, before the first 640, before anyone at the core understood what was happening here. The order was simple and proud, and it was already a lie. Hold position, complete the lesson, report the world's surrender within the hour. The high speakers of the Concord, sitting safe in their chamber of polished stone, still believed they had sent 40,000 ships to break one small blue world. They did not yet know that one small blue world had answered with something the archives did not contain. Voral read the order twice and let it go. There was no lesson left to complete. There was only the question of how the iron tally would end. Captain Drent, he said, how many do we have left? Drent did not need to check. He had been counting since the first sweep, the way an old officer counts the dead because no one else will. 35,090, Fleetmaster. The Deep Watch has taken 4,922 in 7 sweeps. It is firing once every 40 seconds. Exactly. It has not varied by a breath. It is not in a hurry, Voral said. No, Fleetmaster, it is not. Drent's old eyes were steady on the screen. A thing in a hurry can be made to make a mistake. This is not in a hurry. It will take us 40 seconds at a time, 640 at a time, until the count it gave us reaches 0, and there is nothing in our doctrine that speaks to an enemy who fights on a schedule. A junior officer near the weapons pit broke then. Voral heard it before he saw it. A voice rising too high, the words tumbling out. An officer who had served the count his whole life watching the count fail. We have to scatter. All of us, every ship, fold out now, all directions. It cannot track 40,000 fold points at once. It can, Tessick said quietly, and the junior officer fell silent. It already mapped every drive in the fleet in that first second. It knows the fold signature of every hull here. The moment a ship spins up to fold, it is a tagged number. The ones that have tried to run are the dust at the system edge. It is letting them run far enough to think they have escaped before it touches them. I have watched it do it 11 times. He looked at the junior officer, not unkindly. There is no fold point it does not already have a solution for. It told us that in the first minute, we did not listen. Penrue spoke from her station, her voice flat and certain. I have run the numbers 3 ways, Fleet Master. There is no maneuver in the doctrine that improves our position. Disperse, and it picks us off in the open. Concentrate, and it sweeps us in clusters. Run, and it tags our fold. Hold, and it counts. Every column of the doctrine ends in the same place. The doctrine was written by an empire that believed there was always a number large enough, and it does not have a page for the day there is not. She paused. I am not afraid to die, Fleet Master. I am afraid to die proving a count that has already been disproven. There is no honor in that. There is only arithmetic. Wirral let the silence settle. Then he did the thing a Fleet Master is never supposed to do, the thing his whole life had trained him against, and he found, to his surprise, that it was easier than the count had been. He stopped fighting. All ships, he said, cease fire. The order moved through the fleet like a held breath. One by one, the ships of the Iron Tally that still had charge in their chambers powered down their forward arrays. The white fire that had lit Earth's northern sky for 16 minutes faded and was gone, and the dark above the small blue world became dark again, and in that dark, the Deep Watch hung, golden corona slowly fading, patient, waiting. Fleet Master, Drent said softly, if we cease fire, it may simply finish us faster. It is not firing faster now than it was a minute ago, Vorall said. It fires once every 40 seconds whether we shoot or not. Our fire does nothing. It never did anything. We have been spending our magazines so that we would feel we were doing something. He straightened. I am done pretending. Signals. Open the band. The signal officer opened it. This is Fleet Master Vorall, he said to the dark slab. The Iron Tally has ceased fire. Not as a trick. Not to buy a fold. We have stopped because we have understood. We came here believing we carried power, and you have shown us, very patiently, that we carried only a number. I am not going to ask you for mercy, because I do not think mercy is the right word for what is happening here, and I would not insult either of us by misusing it. I am going to ask you for something else. He paused. What do you want from us? The Deep Watch did not fire on the 40th second. It was the first time in 7 sweeps that it had broken its schedule, and the whole bridge felt the absence of the shot like a sound. 40 seconds passed, and 45, and a minute, and the dark slab did not kill another 640 ships, and a line of text built on Vorall's plate. You are the first of your fleet to ask the right question. Then, below it, more. The Concord has spent 900 years teaching the galaxy that a count is the same as power. You taught it to the Threllic before you broke them with weight of fire. You taught it to the Vanu before you buried their worlds under tonnage. You taught it to 100 small species who learned to measure their lives by how many of your ships might one day fold into their sky. The galaxy believes you. That belief is your true weapon. The fleets are only the proof of it. We did not come here to destroy your fleet. We came here to destroy the belief. Your fleet is simply where the belief is written. Vorall read it, and understood it, and felt the cold thread that had run through him since the first scan finally go still, because the dread had nowhere left to climb to. You are not erasing the Iron Tally, he said slowly. You are making an example of it. We are making a correction. There is a difference. An example is for the watcher. A correction is for the record. When this is over, the Concord will not be able to tell its children that a count is power, because the largest count in 400 years will have folded into one system and met one hull and come home as dust. The word harmless will go out of your archives. The word that replaces it is the one we hid for 900 years, and you will spend the next 900 learning to say it correctly. And the world below, Vorall said. Earth, the one you guard. We do not guard it. The text paused. We are it. The dark you never looked into is not beside that world. It is that world's other face. You charted the planet and filed it harmless, and you never wondered what a quiet world does with 900 years, and a galaxy that has promised to come and erase it one day. It builds in the dark. It builds one hull. It makes that hull enough. Drent let out a long, slow breath. One hull, he said. They built one. They could have built 10,000. They built one, and they made it answer 40,000. Because one hull answering 40,000 is the correction. 10,000 answering 40,000 would only have been a battle, and a battle the Concorde could explain away. One is a word the Concorde cannot unhear. He looked at Voral with something close to awe. Fleetmaster, they are not fighting a war. They are writing a sentence in a language the whole galaxy will have to read, and our fleet is the ink. Penrose spoke, very low. It is the most efficient act of war I have ever seen, and there is not a single wasted shot in it. 640 per sweep. The same number every time. It is not killing as fast as it can. It is killing to a budget. Whatever the final number is, it has already decided it, and it is simply spending toward it. We are not in a battle, Fleetmaster. We are in a transaction, and the other party set the price before we arrived. Voral thought of the high speakers in their chamber of polished stone, 11 light-years away, 11 minutes behind the truth, still believing they had sent a punitive force to lessen a backward world. He thought of how they would receive the report. Not a battle lost, not a fleet defeated, but a count erased. 40,000 ships sent to prove that a count was power, answered by one hull that proved it was not. There was no speech a high speaker could give that would survive that arithmetic. How many of us, Voral said, do you intend to send home as dust, and how many as the ones who tell the story? It was the most important question of his life, and he asked it in the flat, even voice of a fleetmaster, because that was the only voice he had ever had, and it was finally, at the end, the right one. The Deep Watch answered, Of 40,012, you have seen 4,922 become dust. We will take that count to 10,000, and no further. 10,000 is the number written in your own punitive doctrine as the threshold of a war fleet, the line above which a force is called an army instead of an escort. We will erase exactly that line. The Concorde will understand the message in its own language. The remaining 30,012 will fold home intact, every crew alive, every log full, and they will carry the correction to the core, and the Concorde will read it in the only way a Concorde can read anything, by the count. Voral felt the bridge around him go still in a new way, not the stillness of the dying, but the stillness of men who have just been told they will live and have not yet decided whether that is a mercy or a burden. 10,000, he said. You will kill 5,078 more of my ships, and then you will stop. We will correct 5,078 more, and then we will stop. The crews of those ships made the same choice you made, Fleetmaster, and made it later. That is the only difference between the dust and the witnesses. You stopped firing and asked the right question. The 5,000 who fold home will be the ones who, like you, understood. The 5,000 who become dust will be the ones who tried to fold and run, who believed to the last breath that the count would save them. We are not choosing who lives. You are. You have been choosing since the first sweep. We are only keeping the count honest. Voral turned to his bridge. 35,090 ships still hung in the dark, their forward arrays cold, their crews watching their fleetmaster, waiting for the order that would decide which of them became the dust and which became the witnesses. He looked at the young officer who had laughed, and the boy looked back at him with an expression Voral would carry for the rest of his life. Not fear anymore, but a kind of desperate, dawning hope. The hope of a soul who has just learned that survival is a choice, and is terrified he will choose wrong. All ships, Voral said, and his even voice carried across the wide band to every crew in the iron tally. Cease all fold attempts. Power down your drives. Hold station. Do not run. The thing in the dark is not killing the ones who stay. It is killing the ones who run, because the ones who run still believe the count can save them, and that belief is exactly the thing it came here to end. If you want to fold home, the way home is to stop believing you were ever going to fight your way out. Hold station. That is the order. That is the last order I will ever give you, and it is the only one that has ever mattered. The order went out across 35,090 ships. For a long moment, nothing happened, and Voral understood that the order he had just given asked his crews to do the single hardest thing the Concorde had ever trained out of them, to trust something other than the count, to sit still in the dark while a weapon that could not be touched decided their fate, and to believe that stillness was safer than flight. It went against 900 years of doctrine. It went against the whole of who they were. A Concorde crew did not hold and wait to be spared. A Concorde crew counted, and acted on the count, and the count had always been the thing that kept them alive. To set it down now, in the dark, with dust where 5,000 of their sister ships had been, was to step off the only ground they had ever stood on, and trust that something would hold them up. Not every crew obeyed at once, and Vorel watched the holdouts with a grief he had no rank for. A cluster of 40 ships on the lower flank, a squadron under a captain who had earned 3 campaign honors and could not make his honor mean nothing now, spun up their drives in defiance of the order, and the patient blue beams reached out and took them, 40 more clouds of dust, and the count climbed. 4,962, Drent said. His voice did not shake, but it had gone very careful, the way a voice goes when its owner is holding something heavy and does not want to drop it. Each ship that runs is a ship that chose the count over your order. The Deep Watch is right, Fleetmaster. We are choosing. Every fold bloom out there is a crew deciding, in its last second, that the number it served its whole life is more trustworthy than the truth you just told it. And it is wrong. And it dies of being wrong. And there is nothing we can do but say it louder. Vorel said it louder. He opened the wide band again, and this time he did not speak as a Fleetmaster giving an order. He spoke as a creature who had served the count for 400 years and had set it down 20 minutes ago and was still alive. To every captain in the Iron Tally who is reaching for the drive, he said, I served the count longer than any of you. I trusted it more than any of you. And I am telling you, from the center of this fleet, with dust where 5,000 of our ships used to be, that the count cannot save you here. It never could. The thing in the dark counted us before we fired a shot. The only number that matters now is the one you choose. Hold, and you are a witness. Run, and you are arithmetic. I am not ordering you to be brave. I am telling you that holding still is the only brave thing left, because it is the only thing that asks you to stop believing the lie that brought us here. Set the count down. It is heavier than you think, and you do not need it anymore. For a moment, the fold blooms continued. 3, then 2, then 1. And then they stopped. Across 35,000 ships, the running stopped, not because the crews had run out of nerve, but because they had found a different kind of it. And one by one, in the dark above the small blue world that the Concorde had called harmless for 900 years, the engines of the Iron Tally went dark, and the running stopped, and 35,090 ships chose, for the first time in the history of the Sevoon Concorde, to trust a truth instead of a number. Not every ship obeyed. Vorel watched the count on Drent's board, and for the first 90 seconds after the order it held, 35,090, steady, engines dark, the fleet finally still. Then a cluster on the far flank, a squadron of 70 fast cruisers under a captain named Hessek, who had never lost an engagement, and could not make himself believe he was losing this one, spun up their drives all at once, and folded for the system edge. The Deep Watch tracked them without seeming to move at all. 70 beams of patient blue reached out across the dark, each one finding a fold signature it had mapped 20 minutes earlier, and the squadron of Captain Hessek became 70 clouds of glittering dust at the very edge of the system, close enough to freedom that the light of their dying took 4 full seconds to crawl back to the Corinhall's sensors. Vorel watched it arrive. He said nothing. There was nothing to say that the dust had not already said. 35,020, Drent reported. It has taken 4,992 in 8 sweeps. It is firing once every 40 seconds, exactly. It has not varied by a breath. It is counting toward 10,000, Vorel said. Not 5, it told us 10. The ones who run are filling the count. The ones who hold are not. He raised his voice for the wide band again. Hessek's squadron just died running. They were 8 ships from the edge. The thing in the dark let them get that close, so the rest of you would see exactly how far running gets you. Hold station. I will not say it again, because I should not have to. The fleet held. For a long, terrible stretch of minutes, no engine in the Iron Tally lit, and the Deep Watch did not fire, and the dark above Earth was simply dark. 2 fleets, one of 35,000, one of a single hull, hanging motionless over a small blue world, while a number that had ruled this part of the galaxy for 900 years finished dying. Penru broke the silence quietly, only for Voral's ears. It stopped firing when we stopped running. Do you see it, Fleetmaster? It is not on a schedule of 40 seconds. It never was. It fires when a ship runs. The 40-second rhythm was only the rhythm of how fast our crews lost their nerve. As long as we hold, it holds. The schedule was never the Deep Watch's, it was ours. Voral looked at the dark slab on the central screen, and saw that she was right, and felt something turn over in him that was almost too large to hold. The whole engagement, every sweep, every 640, had been the iron tally killing itself, ship by ship, every time a crew chose the count over the truth. The Deep Watch had simply been the hand that finished what the running started. It had not been slaughtering his fleet. It had been waiting for his fleet to stop slaughtering itself. Then the relay folded in from the core again. This time the order was different. This time the high speakers had received the first reports. 11 minutes old, but enough, and the proud certainty was gone from the message. In its place was something Voral had never heard from the core in his entire service: confusion. The order read, Fleetmaster Voral, report the nature of the enemy contact immediately. The Iron Tally's casualty figures are not consistent with any known threat. Confirm the contact count. Confirm. There must be more than one. Voral read it, and for the first time since the first scan, something almost like a bitter smile moved across his face. They cannot believe it either, he said. The high speakers, in their chamber of stone. They have read that we have lost 5,000 ships, and they cannot believe one hull did it. So they are asking me to confirm there are more. They want me to tell them there is a fleet out here, because a fleet they could understand. One ship they cannot. He turned to the signal officer. Send them the truth. Contact count 1. Repeat, 1. The enemy is one hull. It is not in our archives. It has taken 5,000 of our ships and warmed by 8 degrees. It fires when a ship runs, and it will stop at 10,000, because it told us it would. Send that, word for word. The signal officer sent it. Varel knew what would happen at the core when it arrived. The high speakers would read contact count 1, and they would not be able to make the words mean anything. And that exactly, was the correction the Deep Watch had come to write. Not the dust. The dust was only the proof. The correction was the moment the high speakers of the Sevun Concord sat in their chamber of polished stone and read the number 1, and felt, for the first time in 900 years, small. Fleetmaster, Tessic said, the contact is doing something new. Voral turned to the central screen. The Deep Watch had begun to move. Not toward the fleet, not to run. It rolled, slowly, the way it had before, but this time it kept rolling, turning its full length across the dark, and as it turned, the pale apertures along its flank dimmed, one after another, until the bristling battery that had killed 5,000 ships went entirely dark. The golden corona of absorbed fire faded to nothing. The dark slab hung over the small blue world, vast and weathered and quiet, and it stopped firing. It has ceased fire, Drent said. He checked his board, checked it again. The count is at 4,992. It is 5,008 short of the 10,000 it promised, and it has stopped. It said 10,000, Voral said slowly. It said it would correct exactly 10,000. No one has run since Hessek, Penru said. Look at the board. Not one fold attempt in 6 minutes. The whole fleet is holding. She turned to Voral, and there was wonder in her steady eyes now. It has nothing left to correct, Fleetmaster. The 5,000 it promised were never a quota it intended to fill. They were the most it would have to take if we kept running. We stopped running at 4,992. So it stopped killing at 4,992. The number was always in our hands. A line of text built on Voral's plate, and as it built, Voral understood that the Deep Watch had been counting something other than ships all along. The number we came to correct was never a count of hulls. It was a count of how long it would take you to stop. 10,000 was the most your own doctrine would have forced from us. The line above which a force is called an army instead of an escort. The line where your law finally permits a commander to break off without dishonor. We were prepared to take you all the way to that line. We hoped you would stop before it. You stopped at 4,992. You stopped before your law allowed you to. That has never happened in the 900 years we have watched the Concord. A fleet master broke off before the count gave him permission. That is the correction. That is the thing your archives will not be able to explain. Not that one hull beat 40,000. That a fleet master chose the truth over the count, while there was still a count to hide behind. Vorel stood very still. He had spent his whole life serving the number. He had risen through 40,000 ranks of the Concord by trusting it, by never doubting it, by treating the count as the one thing in the dark that could not lie. And the thing in the dark had just told him that the only act of his entire life that mattered was the moment he had stopped trusting it, 5,000 ships too early. "You let me stop," he said. "You could have taken all 5,000, and you let me stop the moment I held the fleet." "We did not let you stop. We watched you stop. There is a difference, and it is the whole of the difference. We came to correct the Concord's belief that a count is power. The correction is not the dust we made. The correction is you, Fleet Master Vorel, who will fold home to a chamber of stone and stand before the high speakers and tell them that you broke off an engagement before your law permitted it, because a single hull taught you that the count was never power, and never had been. You will say it in your even voice, and they will not be able to unhear it, and the word harmless will go out of your archives, and the word that replaces it will be the one you learned today. You are the message, the dust was only the postage." Drent made a low sound, half a laugh, entirely without humor. 900 years, he said. 900 years of building one hull in the dark, and the weapon was never the hull. The weapon was making us doubt the count. They could have killed all 40,000 of us, and the Concord would have called it a tragedy, and built 50,000, and come back angrier. But they did not kill us. They corrected us. They are sending 35,000 ships home, every one of them carrying a fleet master and a crew who watched a count die. That is not a defeat the Concord can avenge. There is nothing to avenge. We were not beaten. We were taught. Vorel looked at the small blue world below the dark slab. He thought of the 900 years it had spent under the word harmless, knowing that one day a punitive force would fold into its sky to erase it, and choosing, patiently, in the dark, not to build a fleet, not to build a wall, not to build a count of its own to answer the Concord's count, but to build one hull and one idea, and to wait until the largest count in 400 years came close enough to learn the idea by force. "What is the word?" Vorel said. "The one you hid, the one that replaces harmless. I would like to carry it home correctly." The Deep Watch was a long time answering. When the text came, it came one word at a time, and Vorel read each one as it built, and the bridge of the Corin Hall read them with him. "The word is patient. You called us harmless, because you saw a quiet world with no fleet, and you mistook quiet for weak. But a quiet world that knows you are coming, and has 900 years to prepare, and chooses to spend those years building one perfect answer, instead of 10,000 frightened ones, is not harmless. It is patient, and a patient enemy is the only kind a counting empire cannot win against. Because a count measures what is in the sky today, and patience builds what will be in the sky on the day you finally come. You spent 900 years counting your fleets. We spent the same 900 years building one hull and learning your every solution. On the day the counts met, the patient won, and it won so completely that it did not even have to finish. Carry that word home, Fleet Master. Patient. Teach it to your children, the way you taught them harmless. And when your children's children look at a quiet world and feel the urge to call it weak, let them remember the dark above this one, and the count that died here, and the word you carried home in its place." Vorel closed all four of his eyes for a moment. Then he opened them and turned to his bridge. "All ships," he said, "power up your drives. We are folding home, not running, not retreating. The thing in the dark is not chasing us, because it does not need to. We are not escaping. We are being sent. Every one of you will fold home with your log intact and your crew alive, and every one of you will tell the truth of what happened here, in your own words, in your even voices, so that the Concord cannot pretend it was anything other than what it was." He paused. "We brought 40,000 ships to erase a world we called harmless. We are folding home with 35,020, and we are carrying a different word, and the word is the only thing we are bringing back that was worth the journey." The drives of the iron tally lit, one by one, 35,020 fold points kindling in the dark above the small blue world, and this time, the Deep Watch did not fire on a single one of them. It watched the fleet it had corrected gather itself to leave, and it held its patient blue batteries dark. And as the first ships began to fold out of the system, it sent one last line across the wide band, to every crew, so that every ear in the iron tally would carry it home. The line read, "Tell them we were always here. Tell them the dark beside a quiet world is never empty. Tell them we are patient, and we are not finished watching, and we will still be here on the day the next empire forgets the word and comes to call us harmless." Brent came to stand beside him at the rail, as the fleet formed up for the fold. The old captain watched the dark slab grow small on the screen, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. Then Drent said quietly, 60 years, Fleetmaster. I have folded out of more systems than I can name, and I have always known why. We came, we counted, we won, we left. Every time, the count told the story, and the story was always the same, and I never once questioned it. He shook his head slowly. We are folding out of this one a different creature than the one that folded in. I do not have a name yet for what we became out there, but I know it is not what we were. It is what the Dark wanted us to become, Voral said. It did not fold us out of this system. It folded a new kind of fleet out of it. The iron tally that arrived believed the count was power. The fleet that is leaving knows it was never anything but a number we agreed to fear. That is the cargo, Drent. 35,000 crews who used to believe and do not anymore. That is heavier than any tonnage we ever carried, and it is the only weight that will matter when we reach the core. Drent was silent a while. Then, in a voice almost too low to hear, "Thank you, Fleetmaster, for stopping when you did, for asking the question. 5,000 of us are dust because 5,000 of us could not. The rest of us are alive because one of us could. I will tell that part of the story too, when I tell it. I will make certain they know the count did not save us. You did, by setting it down." For a moment, no ship moved. 35,020 hulls hung in the dark with their drives lit and their bows already turned toward home, and not one of them folded. Because a strange thing had happened in the silence after the Deep Watch's last line, and every crew in the fleet felt it at once. They were being allowed to leave. They had come to erase a world, and the world had answered with one hull, and the one hull was now opening the door and standing aside, and there is no harder thing for a proud fleet to do than walk through a door an enemy has held open for it. The young officer at the plotting table, the one who had laughed at the count of one, a lifetime ago, 26 minutes ago, spoke for the first time since. His voice was not steady, but it was clear. "Fleetmaster, when we get home, when they ask us what happened, what do we tell the ones who were not here? They will not believe one ship. I do not believe it, and I watched it." Voral considered the question, because it was the only one that mattered now, and because the boy deserved a true answer. "You tell them exactly what you saw," he said. "You do not soften it to make it believable. You do not inflate the enemy to a fleet so the arithmetic forgives us. You say one hull, and you let them feel what you felt when you heard it. The Deep Watch did not send 35,000 of us home so that we could go back and lie. It sent us home so that 35,000 of us would say the same true thing, in 35,000 voices, until the truth was too large to bury. You are not a survivor, officer. You are a witness. There is a difference, and it is the whole of the difference, and you will spend the rest of your life learning it." The boy nodded slowly. Around the bridge, the other officers had gone quiet again, and Voral understood that he had just told all of them the same thing, and that each of them had already begun, in their own way, to become the witness the Deep Watch had made of them. Voral watched the line fade from his plate. Then he gave the order, and the Corin Hall folded, and the dark slab over the small blue world dropped away behind it into the long night, and Fleetmaster Voral began the journey home with a fleet of survivors, a hold full of dust where 5,000 ships had been, and a single word that weighed more than all of it together. The fold home took 19 days, and Voral spent every one of them composing the report that would end his career, and could not be allowed to. He wrote it in the small cabin off the Corin Hall's bridge, alone, by hand, in the old script the Concord used for matters of record. He wrote and struck out and wrote again, because there was no form in the Concord's archives for what he had to say. There was a form for a battle won. There was a form for a battle lost. There was a form for a fleet destroyed, and a form for a fleet that broke off in good order, and a form for a fleet master who had failed and must be replaced. There was no form for a fleet that had brought 40,000 ships against one hull and come home with 35,020 and a word. On the 9th day, Drent found him at it. "You have struck out the same line 11 times, the old captain said, looking over Voral's shoulder at the page. "Read it to me." Voral read it. The enemy contact was a single hull, not in any archive of the Concorde, the Threlic, or the Vanu. It absorbed the sustained fire of 40,000 ships and warmed by 8 degrees. It destroyed 4,992 of our vessels, each with a single shot, and then it ceased fire of its own accord, having taken no damage. It permitted the remaining 35,020 to fold home intact. He set down the stylus. "Every word of that is true, and every word of it is a sentence the high speakers will refuse to read. They will read absorbed the fire of 40,000, and they will stop, because the words cannot mean anything to them, and they will decide I am lying, or mad, and they will replace me, and the next fleet master will take the next fleet to the next quiet world and call it harmless, and nothing will have changed." Drent was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You are writing it as a report of a battle. It was not a battle. Write it as what it was." "And what was it?" "A correction," Drent said. "You told the fleet that yourself, so write the correction, not the battle. Do not lead with the tonnage and the casualty figures, because those are the count, and the count is the thing that died out there. Lead with the word. Lead with patient. Tell the high speakers that the Concorde has been wrong about quiet worlds for 900 years, and here is the proof, and here is the word we should have been using, and here is what it cost us to learn it. Make them read the lesson before they read the arithmetic. By the time they reach the count, they will already understand what the count means." Voral looked at the old captain for a long moment. Then he picked up the stylus, turned to a clean page, and wrote a single line at the top. And Drent read it, and nodded, and left him to it. The line read, "The galaxy is not made of counts. We only believed it was, and one quiet world spent 900 years building the hull that would teach us otherwise." On the 14th day, Penru came to the cabin. She did not look over his shoulder. She stood by the small port and watched the fold streaks crawl past in the dark. "The crews are talking," she said. 35,000 ships, and on every one of them, the crews are telling the same story to each other, in the same words. They are not telling it as a defeat. They cannot. There was no moment they could point to and say, "There, that is where we lost." There was only the slow arrival of a truth. By the time we reach the core, Fleetmaster, that story will be told the same way on every ship in the fleet, and there is no high speaker alive who can untell a story that 35,000 crews already believe. She turned from the port. "You are worried they will silence you. They cannot silence the fleet. You did that. When you opened the wide band and let the Deep Watch answer you in front of everyone, the message is already loose. You are only the part of it that has to stand in the chamber." Voral set down the stylus. "I had not thought of it that way." "The Deep Watch did," Penru said. "It opened the band twice, once to answer your demand, and once at the very end. It made sure the message would not depend on one fleet master's nerve. It built 35,000 witnesses, and it sent them all home together, and it gave them all the same word. That is not a thing you do if you want one report read in one chamber. That is a thing you do if you want a belief unmade across a whole empire." She paused at the door. "Finish the report. But know that it is not the weapon. The fleet is the weapon. You are only the firing pin." They folded into the Concorde core on the 19th day. The core was exactly as Voral had left it, a great ringed station the size of a moon, hung in orbit of the Concorde's first world, 10,000 ships at anchor in its slips, the chamber of polished stone at its heart where the high speakers had sat in unbroken certainty for 900 years. The iron tally folded in around it, 35,020 ships, and the Corps' defense net lit up to challenge them, and then read their registries, and went very, very quiet. 40,012 had left, 35,020 had returned. The Corps could count. The Corps had always been able to count, and for the first time in its history, the count it read made no sense to it, because there was no enemy in its archives that could account for the difference. Voral was summoned to the chamber of polished stone within the hour. He went alone, in his uniform, with the report in his hand, and he stood before the 11 high speakers of the Sevun Concorde, in the chamber where the word harmless had been spoken over 1,000 quiet worlds, And he did not bow, because a fleet master, who had learned the word patient, did not bow to account anymore. The first speaker, an old creature named Osuan, whose voice had ordered the erasure of more worlds than any other in the chamber, spoke first. Fleet Master Vorel, you left this core with 40,012 ships to lessen a harmless world. You have returned with 35,020. Your relay reports claim a single enemy contact. We have convened to hear you confirm, in person, that this is an error, that there was a fleet, that the Concord faced an enemy of comparable strength, and acquitted itself with honor, and withdrew in good order. Confirm it, and the record will reflect it, and you will keep your rank. We have read your figures. We are giving you the chance to read them correctly. Vorel understood the offer. It was a kindness, in its way, the only kindness a counting empire knew how to give. They were offering him a count he could survive. All he had to do was lie, and say there had been a fleet, and the Concord's belief would hold, and the next quiet world would be erased on schedule, and the word harmless would stay in the archives, and Vorel would die a fleet master in good standing. First speaker, Vorel said, in his even voice. There was no fleet. There was one hull. The chamber went still. It was not in our archives, Vorel went on. It was not in the Threlix or the Vanus. It absorbed the sustained fire of all 40,000 of my ships, and it warmed by 8 degrees. It destroyed 4,992 of my vessels, each with one shot, and then it stopped, of its own choice, having taken no damage. It let the rest of us come home. It let us come home so that I could stand in this chamber and tell you what I am about to tell you, because the world we called harmless does not want our fleet destroyed. It wants our belief corrected, and it chose me to carry the correction, and it chose 35,000 crews to carry it with me, so that you could not bury it by burying me. Speaker Osuan's voice was very cold. You are telling this chamber that one ship did this. I am telling this chamber that one ship did this, Vorel said, because one ship did this, and because the moment any of us pretends otherwise, we have learned nothing, and the next fleet master will take the next 40,000 ships to the next quiet world, and it will happen again, except the next time the hull may not choose to send anyone home. He took a step forward. The world we called harmless spent 900 years listening to us, promised to erase it one day. It did not build a fleet to answer ours. It did not build a count. It built one hull and one idea, and the idea is this. A count measures what is in the sky today. It cannot measure what a patient enemy is building in the dark for the day you finally come. We spent 900 years counting. They spent the same 900 years preparing one perfect answer. On the day the counts met, the count died, and it died so completely that the hull did not even have to finish the job. And the word, Osuan said, your report circles a word. It is in every paragraph. You have made certain we cannot miss it. The word is patient, Vorel said. It is the word we should have written in the archive where we wrote harmless. The hull asked me to carry it home. It asked me to teach it to the Concord's children the way we taught them harmless, and I am going to, first speaker, with or without my rank, because it is the only true thing I brought back from that system, and it cost 5,000 ships and 70 crews, and the entire faith of my life to learn it. And I am not the only one who will say it. Ask any crew on any of the 35,000 ships in your slips. They will tell you the same story in the same word. You can replace one fleet master. You cannot replace a fleet. The chamber was silent for a long time. Vorel watched the 11 high speakers, and he saw the thing he had come to see, the thing the Deep Watch had sent him 19 days across the dark to deliver. He saw them try to fit the number 1 into a belief that had ruled for 900 years, and fail. He saw the certainty go out of them, the way the white fire had gone out of his fleet over Earth. He saw the count die a second time, here, in the chamber of polished stone, in the faces of the creatures who had spoken it over 1,000 worlds. They had sent 40,000 ships to make a small blue world feel small. The small blue world had sent one hull and one word, and now it was the high speakers who felt small, and they would never again be able to forget it. Leave us, Fleet Master, Osuan said at last, and his cold voice had a crack in it now, the same crack Vorel had heard in his own voice on the bridge of the Corin Hall, 19 days and forever ago. We will consider your report. Consider it carefully, first speaker, Vorel said. The hull is still there. over the world we called harmless. It is not coming for us. It does not need to. It corrected one fleet master and sent him home with 35,000 witnesses. And it knows that one corrected fleet master, and a fleet that believes him, is worth more than 10,000 more dead ships. It built one hull because one was enough. It corrected one fleet because one was enough. And it sent home one word, because one word, once it is in the archive, cannot be unwritten. He turned to go, then stopped at the door of the chamber of polished stone, and spoke without turning back. You asked me to confirm there was a fleet, so the record would make sense. I will not. Let the record not make sense. Let every high speaker who reads it for the next 900 years stop at the number 1 and feel exactly what I felt over that small blue world. That is the only record worth keeping. That is the correction. The world we called harmless paid 900 years to write it, and I will not erase it to save my rank. He left the chamber. The Concorde did not avenge the Iron Tally, because there was nothing to avenge. There had been no battle. There had been a correction, and a correction cannot be answered with a fleet, because a fleet is a count, and the count was the thing that had been corrected. The high speakers debated for 40 days, and in the end, they did the only thing a counting empire could do when the count had failed them. They changed the count. The word harmless came out of the archive where it had sat over 1,000 quiet worlds, and in its place, in the old script of record, 11 high speakers wrote a single word, and the word was patient, and below it, they wrote the only entry the Concorde ever made about the world the softskins called Earth. The entry read, "Do not return. There is nothing here to lessen, and one hull more than enough to remind us why. Counted, 40,012. Returned, 35,020. Difference, the entire faith of an empire, corrected by a single hull, over a world we called harmless, and now call patient." Fleetmaster Voral kept his rank. He had expected to lose it, and he found, when he did not, that he no longer cared about it the way he once had, because rank was a count too, and he had learned what counts were worth. He served the Concorde for 30 more years, and in those 30 years, not one punitive fleet folded into the sky of a quiet world, because every fleet master in the Concorde had read the entry in the archive, and every one of them stopped at the number 1 and felt small, and turned the fleet around. Drent retired to the Concorde's first world, and lived long enough to teach the word patient to his own children's children, exactly as the Deepwatch had asked. And Penru took command of a frigate squadron, and was known, ever after, as the captain who held her fire over Earth, which in the new Concorde was the highest honor a captain could carry. The young officer who had laughed at the count of 1 rose, in time, to fleetmaster himself, and on the day he took command of his first fleet, he stood on a high bridge much like the Corin Halls, and told his crews the story of the dark slab over the small blue world, and he told it true. One hull, and he watched their faces as the truth arrived, and he understood at last what Voral had meant about the difference between a survivor and a witness. He never forgot the word. None of them ever forgot the word. That was the whole of the weapon, and it had never once needed to be fired again. And far away, in a high orbit over the northern pole of a small blue world, the dark slab the soft skins called Deepwatch hung in the quiet, weathered and patient, and unhurried, exactly as far from finished as it had been on the day the largest count in 400 years folded into its sky and learned, 640 ships at a time, the word it should have used all along. It did not move, it did not glow. It simply watched the dark it had been built in, the dark the Concorde had never looked into, and it waited, the way a patient world waits, for the next empire that mistook quiet for weak. It would not have to wait forever. It never did. But it would wait, because waiting was the weapon. And one hull, patient enough, in the dark long enough, was always, in the end, more than enough. The count was wrong, and one quiet world had spent 900 years making sure that someday, over a small blue planet, an empire would finally learn it.